e quindi io inviterei subito la nostra prima relatrice, che è Irmi Seidl. L'avete già conosciuta e essenzialmente il suo intervento riguarda proprio il tema della limitatezza delle risorse. Il titolo è La crescita economica in un pianeta finito, e io pregherei Irmi di prendere la parola.
I'm going to give you a presentation on the topic of economic growth on a finite planet. And I'm going to introduce a few of these limitations of the planet Earth, and also to give a few ideas of perspectives or question where we have to go. I have, we can't, just a moment. So, okay, what I want to start with is just to tell you what I'm going to present in the next 20-25 minutes. I'm going to just give an idea and to underline the limitness of the system Earth. Then I will introduce very briefly the discussion about the Anthropocene. That means that humanity has changed the system of the functioning of the Earth. We are in a new era, epoch of development of the system Earth. Then I will show you a few of the exponential growth dynamics we have witnessed in the last 200 years, mainly 50 years. Then I'm going to introduce briefly the ecological footprint, which you might know. I will also get a few ideas on the energy question and on the resource question, and then what are the major environmental objectives we have to realize in the next years. So the Earth is a material, enclosed system. There is just radiation and heat from the Earth, from the sun coming in, and we're giving off heat. So we are on this limited planet, and we don't have more resources, more energy. There might be ideas that a German economist said that recently, that if we are really spare of energy and resources, we could go to the planet Mars. But as I will show you later, this is not possible due to energy reasons, because more and more we need energy, a lot of energy, to get energy and resources. So, but this planet Earth is not just for humans, but we have to leave enough space and dynamics for the ecological system. There is, I hope you can see that, yeah. There is this idea from Herman Daly, an American economist, who said that we have transgressed from an empty world to a full world. In earlier time, the economic system was quite limited, but more and more we are increasing the economic system. We are using more and more resources, more and more energy, which means that the economic system is getting bigger and bigger, and the space for the ecological system is getting more and more reduced. For example, we have less and less fertile earth, land, we have less and less clear water, we are using land for mining, and so on. But this means that the ecological processes are damaged, are reduced. We have to do the recycling which the earth, the ecological systems did. We have to replace that more and more by artificial processes. So why and in which way have we transgressed to this full world? I'm going to introduce briefly how we get to this Anthropocene, which I mentioned in the beginning. We are using more and more space. We are more and more people. We have a population growth. We have more and more waste to handle. We have, in this way, we have an important impact on the system Earth. We are changing processes. We are changing the atmosphere. We are using land, ecosystem, biodiversity, and the important thing, these processes are irreversible. That means that we really change for the next 100 or 1,000 years, we change how the Earth is functioning. This constitutes this new geological epoch, the Anthropocene. This expression, this Anthropocene, was already introduced by an Italian geologist in the 19th century, and they realized already at this time that with the industrialization we are going to change processes in a very fundamental way. The last 10,000 years we had the Holocene, and the advantage of, or the very productive area was that the system didn't change too much. It was very resilient, very stable, and it allowed the humanity to develop the civilization. But what we are going to do now is that we are bringing uncertainties, instabilities into the system, which may also impact on our development of the civilization and of the life of humanity. There were ecologists, scientists from all over Europe and I think all over the world who tried to identify the main problems we are getting to install. This is a publication by Rockström, a Swedish person with a lot of other people, and he said we have 9 major limitations and problems. This is starting from the global change. We have acidification of the oceans. We are changing the nitrogen and the phosphorus cycle. We are damaging biodiversity, we have impact on the ozone hole, and so on. And they said that there are already 3 areas where we have transgressed the Earth's limits. This is biodiversity. We have jeopardy and destruction of species which we had never before. We have the climate change. We have the CO2 emissions are too high. We are changing our climate. You have heard that about this from the climate reports. And we have already impacted too much on the nitrogen cycle. We are using a lot of artificial fertilizer which are washed out in streams, in waterways, in land, and we have changed this whole cycle, which means a lot of pollution, reactions, things like this. These are these red areas, and they said we have transgressed this. In the other areas, we are still below the limits, but we have to be very careful, for example, in the phosphorus cycle or in the acidification of the oceans, where we are also already quite close to the limits. So how have we done that? We have had exponential growth in very many areas. This is a publication in a scientific journal, American Scientific Journal, and it's interesting because they show in very many areas where we had exponential growth. This starts from population, CO2, but also water dams. It includes McDonald's restaurants, it's waste, it's biodiversity. It's very many things where we had enormous growth, either since the industrialization, but much more so since the 1950. Since the after World War phase, we had exponential growth very strongly. I will develop that tomorrow a little bit more. So here I show you a graph on the extraction of biomass, of ores and fossil fuel, of construction material, and of fossil fuels. We are going to hear more about the minerals I get later. But here you see also we have a strong increase since the early 90s, but 20th century, but mainly since the Second World War. And the black line is the GDP, which grows more, but we have still a huge increase in the extraction of all this material. And this changes the earth. If you imagine extraction of fossil fuels, of ores, of construction materials, this needs a lot of land, a lot of emission, a lot of also toxic substances. So often people tell me growth is good. Why are you against growth? My children are growing and I'm very happy that my children are growing. So if somebody says that, this is the growth development of children, here of girls. So you see they grow until the age of 18 or 19 and then it's finished. And then we go on growing by intellectually. We are getting mature, we are changing, we are developing, and we are not anymore growing physically and quantitatively. And I think also our society is ripe to change, not to grow anymore quantitatively, but to grow, to increase, to develop in quality, in wisdom, in maturity. So somebody, I think it was Vito, mentioned the limits of growth in the 70s. This was a very important publication. So recently there was an Australian person, Turner, who revised the limits of growth. And you might have heard many people said, oh, all the scenarios from the Meadows, they were too dim, they were too pessimistic, and they forecasted a collapse in the 90s, and we are still living very well. So Turner revised that, and he showed first that the Meadows didn't forecast breakdowns in the 90s, but they said we might get into problems in the 2050, 2020s on. And then he looked at the data since the 70s to 2010, what has changed, what were the development of consumption, of energy use, of population, and it's quite interesting. He said that he shows very well that their scenarios are quite realistic. Their standard scenarios are verified. And you might not see it very well here. I might show it to you. But he said this orange line is quite narrowly following the standard scenarios of the Meadows. So now we are about here. We are not yet at the point where systems are collapsing, but we are quite close to developments in the standard scenario, which would involve a collapse both in industrial production, in economic production, and later on also in human population. So I think we really have again to take the scenarios of the Meadows quite serious and also look at what they recommended. They had 3 scenarios, the standard scenarios, one scenario which recommended technical improvements and innovation, and one which would stabilize the system is both social innovation and technical innovations. And I think that's really the way we have to go. We need social innovations and technical innovations. So a few words on the footprint. You might have heard ecological footprint. It means how much space do we need for our life, for our daily consumption, for our daily life. The ecological footprint has increased since the 50s, yet because the global population has increased and because we are already damaging ecological systems, our footprint, which we have a right on, which we can use without damaging the system, is decreasing. So we are using more, but we should use even less. You know that the main countries transgressing the ecological footprint are the very wealthy countries, United States, Australia, which have more than threefold of the ecological footprint, Europe between 2 and 3-fold, whereas Asia, Southeast Asia, Africa, South America are either on the footprint or below. Sorry, this was the next. Yes, I have made a correlation between the GDP and the ecological footprint, and you see very well that the higher is the GDP, the higher is the ecological footprint. So the rich countries have also a higher ecological footprint. So then is the question, okay, there is our footprint, but which areas of our daily consumption are highly impacting on the environment? And here you see a graph from the European Environmental Agency, and I use that because it's the same as we have identified for Switzerland. The 3 main areas with the main impact are transport, are food, and are housing and construction. These are the 3 first areas, and then they distinguish in different impacts. But these are the areas where we have to start with changing, both by consumption, but also by producing. The entrepreneurs, the enterprises are called on to develop solutions in these 3 areas. So I'm going to say a few words on the energy question. You might have heard of the peak oil. This means that there will be one point when production is decreasing. So far, this graph shows you the big blue line. This is the new discoveries of oil, and the discoveries are getting lower and lower, and the new discoveries are smaller and smaller, but we are going to have a maximum in fossil fuel production. There is now the sand oil, the shale oil in the States, but if you look really at the quantities, it's quite minor and the sources are quite limited. So the sand oil, the shale oil might be a solution for only the States for a couple of years, but after 2020, 2030, we are expecting again a decline. This concerns the quantity of energy, but much more important to keep in mind is the relationship between the energy we need to produce energy. This is the so-called energy return on energy invested. So in the 30s, when fossil fuel was discovered, you needed 1 unit of energy to get 100 units of energy back. Today, in fossil fuel, you have 1 unity to 20 unities. In shale oil, you have 1 to 8. In the wind energy, you have 1 to 16. You invest 1 unity in energy and you get 16. Whereas in former times, you get 80 or 100. This means that our investments to get energies are increasing. And this means we need a higher part of what we produce to produce energy. And that's exactly what the Meadows also foresaw in the 70s. They said one day we might need a lot of energy and resources to produce new energies. And this we will miss for consumption, for development, other parts of our economy, of our society. But this will also mean that we won't have the same energy system now. We don't have it now, and we won't have in 10 years and one in 20 years, such as we have it now. The time of fossil fuel is going to be at its end. We have to and we will have to transgress to get to a post-fossil society. So I will skip the entropy law, but then I also going to show you just this graph about energy prices. This is a calculation of McKinsey, and it starts the energy prices 1900. Then you see there was a decrease in energy. This is energy and resources price, and then just in 2000 or a little before, the energy and resource price increased a lot. And there are serious investigations which claim that although the economic crisis we have seen since 2007 has its reasons in the energy and the resource price increases. So I have tried to show you a little bit the situation on resources, energy. Now, what are the major environmental objectives our society have? This is, on the one hand, the global challenge. We have to reduce the energy consumption. No, we have to reduce the CO2 emissions by 85 to 95% by 2050. This is also a European objective. So imagine, that's quite a lot. And I will show you where we are now. And then we have the resources. We have the minerals, we have the construction material, the ores. And at the European level, we say, if we take into account the decreasing sources and the equal distribution worldwide, we also have to reduce resource consumption by 80 to 90% by 2050. So you see that quite ambitious objectives. So where are we? This is just to give you a very brief glimpse. Now I show you better that. The next one. This is the CO2 emissions, and you see the orange line, for example. It's the 15 European countries, and it has decreased quite a lot since 2008, 2009. We are even at the European level a little bit below of the objective. So the European Union stands quite well with the emission objectives, yet this strong decrease is mainly due to, or strongly due to, the economic downturn. So if the economy is increasing again, we might also have at the European level, we might have problems with the CO2 emission objectives. This is the CO2 emissions. And then I'm going to show you the graph about resource extraction. These are different resources, biomass, construction material, fossil fuel and metals and ores. And you see for the 27 European countries and for the OECD. And you see since the 90s, you see an increase in consumption. So we don't have a reduction, but we have an increase in consumption. Sometimes various statistical offices from the European Union, but also from various countries, they tell us the situation is not so bad, and they focus this orange line. This orange line is the so-called domestic material consumption, and it represents what we consume in our countries. But if you take into account that a lot of energy and resources are needed to produce what we consume, the situation is different. So for example, if you have a car, you have the metal, but the metal is produced in China with coal and things like this, you have another balance. And this, the other four measures, they show you what finally we consume. And this is an increase in consumption, strongly in construction material, because construction of houses, infrastructure is very energy and resource intense. So we have strong objectives to reduce the material consumption. So my last slide. What are the challenges? The challenges are for production and for consumption in 3 areas, and I think we really have to tackle these 3 areas. They are transport. Which kind of transport, which transport systems are we going to develop? We have to focus strongly this area. Then the food system, which kind of foods, where from, how is it produced, what are the transport distances, the packaging, such areas, and then the construction and housing, how are we going to develop our areas, our locations, our urban systems, and how intense, for example, is our housing and living system. Okay, so I think we have to think, how are we going to live, how are we going to structure these 3 areas in the future? And this is a challenge both for consumers and for entrepreneurs. So I thank you very much.
Bene, grazie Irmi, molto affascinante, e abbiamo tempo per 2 domande secche. Poi torneremo a discutere anche con Irmi della sua presentazione, ma per come siamo organizzati abbiamo 2 domande secche da parte vostra ad Irmi. Ovviamente io ne ho una, ma in realtà ne ho parecchie, però ne ho una pronta. Allora, rompo il ghiaccio, come si dice normalmente, e Irmi, mi ha colpito quei grafici che mostravano la crescita esponenziale in tanti contesti. Ecco, quello è uno studio che è stato condotto e ovviamente esamina un comportamento comune a tanti contesti. Questo significa che bisogna lavorare in ciascuno di quei contesti, che sono sia economici che di comportamento delle persone, per cambiare le regole e far ritornare il sistema in una condizione che non è più di una crescita con quei ritmi, ma è una crescita di altro tipo. Hai fatto vedere come i ragazzi crescono e poi fisicamente e poi devono crescere intellettualmente. Cosa significa crescere intellettualmente per i contesti economici e sociali?
I try to even to avoid the expression growth, qualitative growth or intellectual growth. I prefer usually to talk of development. Herman Daly, I showed you one graph. He's a very important American economist, founded ecological economics. He said, growth is the quantitative increase of thing, and development is the qualitative development of things. So that's why I think it's good to distinguish. But so this development, or maybe if you talk of qualitative growth, I think we have to put forward question was, how can we develop in a society so that well-being is increasing? Tomorrow I'm going also to show you that the well-being is not increasing in our societies with the GDP, but is rather decreasing. So the question is, how can we increase our well-being? How can we increase our health system? Not materially our health system, but our health. I mean, we have a lot of health problems of modern civilizations. How can we tackle these things? A lot of people are dying of cancer and heart problems and things like this. How can we develop that and not just, and the main focus is not increase the turnover of the health system, but the quality. So the same thing is old age insurance. How can we regulate this system that people can participate in our society by solving these problems, how to finance it, because old age insurance, for example, is a major growth driver. So also I'm going to talk about that. But then also how, for example, for resources, how can we use resources more efficiently, but on the other part also sufficiency, limitation of use. How can we develop that? What would it mean to use less resources? For example, share things, share cars, share gadgets in households, share structures. I think we have to discuss more qualitatively what do we want to have, how can these things enhance our quality of life, our social relationships, our well-being in the society.
Okay.
I know it's a really big challenge. I know it's a very big challenge, but I think we have to pose these questions, because otherwise we are going to have to face it. There is a Canadian economist, Peter Victor, and he said, better by design than by disaster, which means we have to design our system, otherwise the system will collapse, and then we have to handle the situation in one way or the other, but it will not be such a qualitative way, because then we are going to be in troubles.
Ok, grazie. Abbiamo una domanda, prego.
In realtà è una domanda più politica, quindi non so diciamo se potrà darmi una risposta, però ho visto che molti dati provenivano dalla European Environmental Agency, che è un'organizzazione della Commissione Europea, credo, un ente della Commissione Europea. Dal tuo punto di vista, diciamo, dal tuo punto di osservazione, quanto questa agenzia e i lavori prodotti da questa agenzia influenzano effettivamente poi le politiche europee?
Oh, that's difficult. I have a lot of, I think these agencies are quite reliable and they do good work. I'm very fascinated about all the data they have and the knowledge of these people. So I rely quite a lot on the data. But you are right, the impacts, the impacts on policy, that's a different point of view. And I think really we should not rely too much on politics. Really. My trust is limited. But it's not because the people are bad or they have bad will, but I think these people are not more innovative than we are. They have not better ideas than we have. And I think that often politicians don't change things because they don't know how to do it. They have no solutions. But also, we don't have solutions. I mean, I can't tell you the solution. So why should politicians have the solution if we don't have them? And also another point is, we in this room, we are very aware of environmental problems. But there are many people outside who are not aware of environmental problems. So our society is very polarized. We have different opinions. So it's really hard for politicians to find decisions which satisfy many people. I'm coming from Switzerland. We have direct democracy. I see that regularly. The broad majority of people is quite conservative. So we have votes, and then again and again I'm surprised about how people are conservative and don't want to have real progress. So we need the discussion within the society where you have to go. We have to convince other people. So, but as far as there are so different opinions, societies are polarized, we cannot expect politicians to go ahead too much. So that's why I really think that civil society, it's so important to develop things. And I will give you an example about the energy transition in Germany. By birth, I'm German. I have observed this energy discussions in Germany for 30 years. It's incredible how the people were aware of the energy problems. They were against nuclear energy production. They developed new technologies and things like that. And because the people were so engaged and had good solutions, the chancellor was able to say, we are going to have the energy transition. If there were not this solution prepared in the country, the chancellor would never have dared to decide we will have an energy transition. And the same thing is for other environmental problems. If we prepare solutions, politicians will be quite sure and safe, and then they can decide, yeah, we might take this political decision. It will not give up societal turmoil or upheaval, and we can introduce such solutions. So I think really science and the broad society is very important, but also it's very important to put pressure on politicians to vote people who represent our values and things like this. I think it's also important. But I think we shouldn't wait on politics.
Molto interessante, anche perché noi domenica votiamo per le politiche europee. Tu vivi in Svizzera, vero? Ok. Bene, grazie molto Irmi.